I'll go by year, but because since Jimmy and Toby got traded for in 18-19, and since Brand took over in that offseason, it's been a mess. It's really been a mess. There's been no leverage. The team has had to respond to situations. They've never been able to be proactive. So 18-19, you trade for Jimmy and Toby, you get eliminated by Kawhi's buzzer beater. You sign and trade Jimmy away for Josh Richardson, who's actually your second top scorer the next year in the playoffs, funny enough. But that's when you get 4-0 first round swept by Boston. Simmons misses the whole series with that patella injury. But you tell yourself, okay, Simmons was hurt. We're going to run the team back. You lose in 7 to Atlanta the year after in 2021. But then it's like, okay, now we have to ship off Ben Simmons. Again, the year before, you got to fire Bruce Brown the year before, or Brett Brown. That got to be the excuse. This year, okay, the excuse is we need to move Ben Simmons. We throw him under the bus. Doc Rivers throws him under the bus. Frankly, Embiid also throws him under the bus. A year later, you trade Simmons for Harden, you lose in 6 to Miami in the second round. Year 2 of Miami, he plays well, but meltdown. You don't want to give him the max. Daryl Morey's a liar. So it's always reactive. This was the first year that Morey had to take 2-3 years to put this team in the situation, to be fair, because along the way, there was a lot of moves. There was Al Horford coming in. There was Robert Covington going in and out. There was Josh Richardson going in and out. There was JJ Redick. There was Matisse Thybulle. There was, Jalen McDaniels. There's a cast of characters that's rolled through the Sixers the last 4 or 5 years, and I think it's hilarious. But Morey really put the team in a situation where it's like, no matter you, and it sucks. The Sixers could have won 50 games this year by February, March. There were no moves coming, no matter what. They wanted to put themselves in a situation where they could control what was going down. And I think it worked out.
I think so. I mean, Elton Brand, his legacy is Al Horford. He paid Al Horford $100 million for him to stop killing us, pretty much in the playoffs. That's pretty much why we paid him. It didn't work with Embiid. We thought they could play together. It didn't work. It was the Raptors. Jimmy hurts the most out of any Sixers moment in the last decade.
As it should.
But honestly, the most deflating point was the Hawks series. We had the Hawks beat. We haven't been to a conference finals in my life pretty much, besides 01, and I barely count that. But the Hawks was the most deflating. We were up huge in that series. Should have taken a commanding 3-1 lead. Blew that game. They tied it up, and then the rest was Ben Simmons. I mean, there's the iconic picture of Trae Young guarding him underneath the basket, and he doesn't want to take the shot. So he lost.
Shout out to Toby. Funny enough.
Dude, Toby pulled his best Ben Simmons in that next series. I'll tell you that. He lost all confidence pretty much. I mean, he had no confidence in his game. To this day. And he's still making, 2 years, 52 for Detroit next year.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
Bro, let me ask you something. How happy are you to have him gone before we talk about all the additions?
Dude. I mean, get on him.
Get on him.
Did you see the tweet? Did you see his goodbye tweet where he was like, what can't be said, can't be said. Looking forward to join the Pistons.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he said a year ago the Sixers would trade him for a crumble cookie or something like that. And we were right. And Sixers fans continue to be right about that. I mean, dude, he didn't, he had no confidence in that series. In game 7, he went 0 for 2 from the field, 0 points. It was the perfect end to his career. In Philadelphia, I'll tell you, it'll always be Jimmy versus Toby. That's his legacy, is pretty much and I think it was Ben Simmons, honestly, who he wanted to be. He wanted to be ball dominant, Simmons, and he was worried Jimmy was going to take his touches a little bit. And it was one of the biggest mistakes ever. And we went and decided to max Harris instead of Jimmy. And then there's that, iconic
Tobias Harris
over me. Yeah, exactly. And so that's his legacy, is we took him for 4 years of mediocrity over Jimmy, who made the NBA Finals 2 years ago with Haywood Highsmith. So like
Sixers
it's
legend, by the way.
Sixers legend.
On the
Yeah,
Sixers during this point of time as well.
process Sixer Haywood Highsmith.
Let's
Yep.
go.
So, dude, it won't even feel real till like the season starts and Tobias isn't there. You know, like. But I'm telling you, it's a huge relief. I mean, it was 5+ years on a bad contract. That is like the fact that the Sixers didn't move him before and they let this whole thing drag out. Like, if I'm Embiid, they're saying patience, patience, patience. Like Embiid had the right to be frustrated that he had to deal with the entire Tobias era, and they just let that contract play out. I think they mishandled that for sure.
Your second or third highest paid player is scoring 17 a game, shooting 36% from three, putting up average defense. Like, don't get me wrong, Tobias Harris is not. He's on the court. He's not Ben Simmons right now, but like,
yeah.
It's almost worse. It's almost worse because you can't convince yourself to dump him. You can't when he's averaging like in year two of this contract, in the second year, when he averages 20 a game and he shoots 38% from three, and the eye test isn't passing, but you look at Basketball Reference, you go, like you could talk yourself. It's almost worse. It's almost worse because you could talk yourself into it. I do want to revisit that little sequence. It's probably been talked about so much, and I've talked about it on the pod before. But the only reason that Jimmy is not kept over Tobias Harris is because they traded first round picks for Tobias Harris. They traded the 2020 first round pick, Philadelphia's very own, Miami's Heat's 2021 first round pick as well, which Philly owned at the time. This trade, which goes through in 2018, I believe 2018-19 season, so 2 years before. These first round picks are worth a lot. Jimmy Butler, on the other hand, gets traded for Jared Bayless, Robert Covington, Darius Harch, and a second round pick. Right? So when you trade only that for Jimmy Butler, like, or to be compared to all that you gave up for Tobias Harris, who, to his credit, the season with the Clippers he was having was unbelievable. 21 a game, 45% from three on 5 threes a game. And this is by far, he had by far the best 55 game stretch of his career on the Clippers the season he was traded for. But since they gave up 2 first round picks, they have to max him. They decided we have to max one of the two. We just gave up 2 firsts for one guy. And everyone watching the game of basketball at the time also knew Jimmy Butler was better than Tobias Harris, but that was the rationale. And you go from there. It's literally one of my favorite what ifs in history, because if Jimmy Butler signs, maybe Horford doesn't end up going. Maybe,
Ben doesn't have that.
Yeah, maybe you can overcome. Maybe the Ben Simmons Ben Simmons stuff is overcomable, because frankly, there was an argument that they were the best team in the East that season where they had Jimmy Butler. So there's so many questions here. I don't know. I love it. And then one of my favorite tidbits is in Josh Richardson's interview at the end of the season, his first the season after he gets traded to the Sixers. He's roasting Elton Brand. During my prep, this is one of my favorite things that I found. He's the second. Josh Richardson scores 18 a game in the 4-game sweep where the Celtics sweep the Sixers. He's the second best player on the Sixers, pretty much, in that series by far. Only other double-digit scorer outside of Embiid. And then goes into the press conference, roasts the crap out of Elton Brand, says there's zero accountability here. Same stuff that Jimmy Butler said, and I think he got traded the next year. As Brett Brown gets fired. So that's
you make a good point. You make a good point about the Clippers year. Like, we traded for Tobias when he was at peak value, pretty much, and then like a big part of Doc Rivers was he got the best year out of Tobias Harris, and I think that prolonged Doc's tenure in Philly a little bit. Is that they were hoping that was the right fit, and ultimately didn't work out. But I think they thought, Doc really liked Harris because of that season. So,
he pretty much instantly goes back to being like early Detroit / late Orlando Tobias Harris, which is better than like early career Tobias Harris. That's not max player Tobias Harris, and like you're screwed at that point. Like, because and Tobias Harris was a plus NBA player during the back end of this contract. Don't get me wrong, he was an above average NBA player. But if your third contract, if your second contract on your team is barely an above average NBA player, you're screwed, especially as a contender. And that's why he's the scapegoat. But is it really a scapegoat if it was kind of valid? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I think the fact that we can get to where the Sixers fall this upcoming year, like the fact that we were pretty competitive against the Knicks in that series, with Tobias Harris being the second highest paid player. Of course, Maxey ultimately got the extension. He was the clear, there was clearly Embiid and Maxey, but it just goes to the point of like Tobias was still on the floor playing key minutes in that series, and he was our second highest paid player. We didn't move him. It was a transition year, and we still were competitive. Like it makes me feel decent. I think about the Sixers in the coming year.
I mean, your second highest paid player put up 9 points a game in that series, right? So,
right. Yep.
I mean,
shout out.
If Anthony, do you have anything else on this season, the past few seasons? If not, I'm down to I'll get into the off season.
I saw something about Republicans should try to convince voters that Tobias Harris is related to Kamala Harris, so that or undecided voters.
Definitely.
Like, absolutely not. Like, let's get a mid-president who on paper might look great, but in material is just not executing, especially not in the fourth quarter when the playoffs come around. So I don't know, man. I mean, good luck, good riddance. I'm really happy for you. Like, and I don't like the Sixers as a Celtics fan, but as an NBA fan, it just feels good. He can be back in Detroit, and it shuts a very long and painful chapter for you guys. So congratulations.
Yeah.
So good to move on.